If you want to learn how to keep excessive heat from damaging your plants, maybe using shade cloths or a couple other tips and tricks, then stay tuned because this episode's for you. Hey everybody, I'm Alan Schaefer. Welcome to Custom Garden Solutions. So we're just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and it's late March and the temperatures are starting to rise. It's been in the 60s, even the low 70s the last couple of weeks. It's been very nice, but the weather person is saying that for the next week, it's going to be in the mid 80s or higher. And if you know anything about Arizona weather, it only gets hotter from there. Temperatures in the summer can reach 115, 120 degrees pretty regularly. So we've got a lot of cold crops like broccoli and cauliflower growing here. Other cold crops include things like cabbage and Brussels sprouts, but we're growing a lot of broccoli and cauliflower. And we just did an episode on that a couple of weeks ago. It's been a bumper crop, one of the best seasons I've ever had. And a lot of it's due to the cooler weather that we had here in Phoenix this year. Cool weather with mild sun. It's been really great. And I'm also growing a lot of cold weather crops. We have several different types of spinach, several different varieties of kale, several different types of lettuce and Swiss chard. What all these crops have in common is they are all cold weather or cool weather crops. They prefer cooler temperatures. They don't do as well in high temperatures. In high temperatures, they can get stressed. They can bolt or go to seed. They also can become bitter, and in some cases, they just die. So I want to do something to extend the season a little bit, and we can do this a variety of ways. The first way is by using shade cloth. Let me show you what we're doing with the shade cloth. So one of the things that we've done to kind of reduce the heat, protect the plants from the heat, is we put shade cloth on the outside of the cage, rolling across the length of the garden. I actually have half the garden. And this is on the outside of the cage, and it's 70% version of shade cloth. All right, so here's a view of the shade cloth that's going over the top of the cage. And if you wonder what I'm talking about when I talk about a cage, almost all of the gardens here in Phoenix at this agriculture club use cages over their gardens. It just gets so hot out here and so dry at some points that birds become a real issue, and they're eating your plants, not so much for the nutrition, but for the hydration. So here's the top of the cage, and this is 70% shade cloth. You see we just rolled it over the top. All right, so the general rule is that you want to put shade cloth with higher density that lets less sun through on the top where we've got 70%, and on the sides, because it's not getting as much direct sun, you want to put a little bit lower density. So what we have here is some 40%. And we just let this fall down. so that at the end of the day, the sun coming from the west isn't penetrating into the garden quite as much. All right. So as you can see, now I've lowered on the west side the 70%, or excuse me, the 40% shade cloth. And this will work wonders. We've now got it covered on the top, and we've got it covered on the west side. The east side here isn't quite as important because in the morning it's probably 50, 60 degrees out when the sun's on the east side of the garden. It's only there for a short period of time at this time of year, but we're more worried about what's happening at the top in the middle of the day and on the west side at the end of the day. So shade cloth or shade materials work to protect livestock or pets or people or plants from getting too much direct sunshine. They can also work as a privacy barrier or a windscreen. Quite often you see them on tennis courts so that the wind doesn't blow through. So they can be used for a lot of different things. We're using them to protect our garden from excessive heat. And depending on where you're at, it really depends on how you're going to use it. You know, I'm here just outside of Phoenix. It gets really hot. We're using 70, 80% shading on top, 40, 50 on the sides, because it just gets so hot here. If you're from the northern climates and it's not getting as hot, you may want to get a lower percentage of density. Now, you can do it a lot of different ways. When I go back to Chicago this summer, hopefully I'm going to sell my house and I'll be a full-time Arizonian after that. But when I go back to Chicago, one of the things I do is I grow tomato plants, and behind them I have broccoli, cauliflower, and things like that. So the tomatoes love the heat, broccoli, cauliflower, not so much, right? So in Illinois, in April and May, it's fine for the broccoli and the cauliflower. And they start growing, and then when it gets warm enough, I'll plant a tomato plant in front of it so that it's shading the sun from the broccoli and the cauliflower. Then what happens in June, July, and August, when the tomato plant is 5, 6, 7, 8 feet high, behind it in the shade are the cool weather crops like broccoli and cauliflower. Then in September, October, when the leaves start to die in the tomato plant and ultimately you pull out the tomato plant, then you're in September, October, even early November, where there is no more shade on those broccoli and cauliflower plants, and they grow very healthy. So you can use other plants to provide some of your sunshade protection. So we've applied the 70 or 80% shade cloth to the top, where it's getting direct sun from above, and on the sides, we're using 40% shade cloth. And that's the general rule of thumb, that you're going to have the heavier shading on the top and the lighter shading on the sides. What shade cloths do is they basically just eliminate some of the sun, but they also keep some of the heat from reaching your plants. So you want to make sure you have your shade cloth far enough away from your plants that it's not heating up right where the shade cloth is. The sun's going to hit that shade cloth. In our instance here on top, it's a light color to keep it cool. But if you've got the shade cloth right on top of your plants, it's going to heat up that shade cloth, and that heat's going to emanate down to your plants. So here we've got, 8 feet between the roof of the cage and the ground in the gardens. So most shade cloths are water permeable, or they'll let water flow through. So if you're getting rain, or if you're sprinkling or have irrigation applications, it's going to let the water through. A byproduct of this is that I have some smaller plants that are kind of tender, some seedlings, and if a strong storm came in, the pounding might damage their growth. So having the shade cloth on top kind of slows down the rain beating down, so it just drips down very lightly into the garden. So a little byproduct or a little side benefit of shade cloth. Now, I realize a lot of you at home don't have a cage that you have to put your shade cloth on, although some of the people here in the community watch my YouTube episodes. So I'm going to tell you how we did it. It's like, how do you get this stuff rolled out all the way through? I thought about, a long pole with a hook on the end. You can't climb on this stuff, you'll fall right through, break your neck. So what we did was, this was the original packaging that came in, and it had some two-sided tape. So we rolled it in, back into the tube. And then we took a 10-foot piece of PVC, and we ran a string through each end. And it was long enough that my friend Keith could be on one side of a 40-foot garden, and I was on the other side of the 40-foot garden, and we both had pieces of the rope. And the rope, we just pulled it, and this would roll, and it rolled out over the top. It took us about 2 minutes per side. It was wonderful. We thought it was going to take a long time. Oh God, how are we going to do this year? Last year we had put it underneath and it didn't work out very well. So if you've got a cage, or if you're here in the Sun City West Ag Club, that's the way we did it. If you want to know more, you can stop by and I'll tell you how. All right, so how do we secure the shade cloth to the top of the cage? We did it with these right here. And let me show you this. This is a shade clip, or a shade cloth clip. You can see you just put the shade cloth over the little spikes, then you shut it into place. And it's got this little area here that you could put rope or zip ties, or I use 14 gauge wire. But you also have this hole in the middle that you could use to secure. So let me show you a close-up. What we've done here is we've clipped on the shade cloth, and then we actually went through the center hole of the clip, and we've just secured it to the fence, okay? Now we went through the center of the hole. You can go through the little loop that's right here, a little loop, but we chose just to go through the center. It just may reinforce it a little bit better in case this end breaks off or whatever. And we've done that on both ends. And you see the other one. So we put one on each end. One on this end and one that you can't see over here. Right here. So I've used the shade clips. There's and the 14 gauge wire. This 14 gauge wire is like my duct tape. I use it for everything all over the garden. For the one on the side, we basically built a contraption. Here, it's simply, we've taken on the bottom, a zip tie, put it around the pole, and this just slides up and down, and we just kind of gather it and connect it up there like that. Here on the other end, we've weighted it down with some PVC and just connected it to the bottom using zip ties. And we just roll this up. For the most part, this stays down, but in December and January and most of February, it's up. We just roll it up, push it back. Same thing here. and that's the way we do it. So that's the way we do it, all right? The one, what works well here, because it's hanging, is to have some type of weight on the bottom or something in the ground to clip it around so it just doesn't blow all over. If it's blowing up against your plants, it could damage your plants. Anytime you're using any kind of netting or sunshade, insect netting, frost protection, and the wind's pushing up against your plants, it's got a good chance of damaging the plants. You'll see that they'll brown and they'll be dead around the outside where that's occurred. So that's why in this situation, we've weighted down, I didn't want that to happen. We've weighted down the bottom with PVC, and on this side we've got it connected. Slide down the pole. All right, so it's pretty easy to put up and down. And another thing you could use is these plastic clips. I got these at Johnny's. See that? All right, so we're right here. We just put a zip tie through it, and we slide it up and down. See the zip tie right here? All right, and that works well on the end. But we could have bought these plastic clips and just clipped it into place. All right, I just didn't think of these. I bought 20 or 30 of these when I was thinking about some poly protection back in Chicago a couple years ago, and I just never used them. But these will work fine. You just clip them right into place. So a lot of different ways you can do it. A couple more quick points. You can get the size, the length, and the width that you want from just about any manufacturer or supplier of sunshades. You know, if you need it 6 feet by 40 feet or 8 feet by 20 feet, they can do that for you. Most of them can. You might not get that in a big box store. You're gonna take what they got, and you can get any color what you want at the big box store, as long as it's black, kind of like Henry Ford and the Model T. But so you can get about any size that you want. The other thing is most of the suppliers of sunshade that are kind of focused on sunshade, they can put grommets in them for you too. You know, I choose not to. I use the little clips. They work as good as grommets or better, and I tend to go that way. Another thing is you can actually, if you have a greenhouse or a caterpillar tunnel, you can secure these using maybe a couple of clips on the ends, like connecting them to the base on the ground. But then you could put rope over the top of either the greenhouse or the caterpillar tunnel. Caterpillar tunnels tend to be like half circles, right? So you could put rope over the top to secure down the sunshade. So a couple different ways you can do it. All right, and I saved 2 really good tips for last. Tip number 1, if it's unusually hot and you need to protect your plants from the heat, one thing you could do is hydrate your plants a little bit more. Water your plants a little bit more. Where normally maybe you don't water in the middle of the day, maybe you run your drip irrigation or you water for a couple minutes in the middle of the day just to cool things off a little bit. Plants transpire. People perspire. So a little bit of a cool down in the middle of the day what might help. I also don't generally water on top, but in the middle of the summer, if I'm worried about broccoli or cauliflower or something like that, I've been known to water on top. Now, the water on top could act as a magnifier and burn your plants. I haven't run into that, but it can happen, or I've heard it can happen. It's never happened to me. And the next thing that you could do is you can mulch. So some tomato plants, their roots might go out 3-4 feet in either direction. And a lot of them are near the surface of the soil. So if you mulch with wood chips or leaves or use some type of fabric, mulching could keep some of that heat from your soil, also keeps the moisture in your soil, all right? So maybe a little extra watering, maybe a little mulch, in addition to everything else I talked about, keep your plants a little healthier. Well, I gotta tell you, I'm quite pleased that we have the sunshade in place. Last year we were scrambling around at the last minute and doing it in 80-degree weather, and the damage had already been done. So we've got the sunshade in place. It's going to be in the mid to upper 80s here in the Valley of the Sun for the next week or so. And after that, when summer kicks in, it's just going to get worse. So I'm glad that's in place. I'm probably also going to turn the timer on the irrigation system up a minute or two, just so we get a little bit more water, and I'll monitor that and probably raise that as it gets hotter and hotter. So a little bit more water as we go. If you enjoyed this episode and you found any value in it, or you appreciate it in any way, do us a favor and like and subscribe. That really helps us out with YouTube, and I'd appreciate it personally. I'm Alan Schaefer at Custom Garden Solutions. Our channel is all about helping you grow herbs and vegetables and all kinds of cool garden stuff so that you can live a healthier and happier life. If you're new to our channel and you want to learn all about growing herbs and vegetables and all kinds of cool garden stuff, start today by subscribing. And so you don't miss anything, hit the notification bell, because you never know where I'm going to show up next. Taillights. They can finally forget what they were talking about, which, you know, happens. Then they got to look at a piece of paper. Somebody's putting in a cage and they're pounding in the conduit to the... Oh, they stopped. Anyway.